It was not anything like the biblical Noah's Ark, nor a vessel built according to divine decree. It had nothing to do with sparing a builder, his family, and preserving animals in a judgment against wickedness.
යානෝය පුත්‍රයානෝය සුදහත්මයානෝය ප්‍රියක දෙව්දුන්ගේ ආරක්ෂාව අනුග්‍රහය ඔවුන් සමග සදහත්ම පවතින සේක. ආමේන්.
It was a disaster waiting to happen, a disaster that perhaps could have been avoided, but was not. The Express Pearl wasn't carrying that kind of cargo. Express Pearl, as a container feeder vessel, served several ports, facilitating the swift movement of cargo. On this particular voyage, she was carrying 1,486 containers. It had all types of cargo on board, from general cargo, reefer cargo, to dangerous goods. As per the manifest and the other information available, the ship had on board 7 out of the 9 classes of dangerous goods. This Singapore-registered Super Eco 2700 class container ship, owned by EOS Roe Private Limited and operated by Express Feeders, caught fire off the coast of Colombo, Sri Lanka on the 20th of May 2021. After burning for 12 days, it sank on the 2nd of June while being towed to deeper waters. It is considered the worst marine ecological disaster in Sri Lanka's history. It initially departed from the port of Hamad in Qatar on the 9th of May, and the ship first called over at Jebel Ali in Dubai. Then the ship returned to Hamad port again on the 10th of May. From Hamad, it sailed to the port of Hazira in Gujarat in India. She left Hazira on the 15th of May, destined for Colombo, Sri Lanka. From Colombo, the ship was to sail to Tanjung Pelepas and Port Klang in Malaysia before heading back to the Persian Gulf, more or less along the same route.
The problem started at Jebel Ali, at the Dubai port, when they were trying to load 2 containers. Now we know about this in more detail, with very badly loaded nitric acid containers to the container. And that's where the fault lies basically. They didn't follow the right practices, and it was a very poorly stored chemicals. And so for 10 days, the ship was actually carrying a cargo that was leaking nitric acid. Nitric acid per se is not a flammable material, but it's a very strong oxidizer. And because there are a lot of other cargo, once they start leaking, there can be the reactions releases heat, and then you can catch fire, and we know that what finally happened. And then the rest of the items also caught fire, and the whole ship was, it was very visible, this fire. And for about 10 days the ship was on fire. So once you start getting to that stage, it's little difficult and you may not have resources. But one thing we must stress, and we are stressing here, is that the issue started in Jebel Ali. It was evident that they knew the containers were leaking, and the ship was really moving from port to port. And both at Hamida, the Qatari port, as well as the Indian port, they were not able to take this cargo off, which they should have done, and they should have not moved from that point with this problem on. And when it arrived at Colombo, they docked the ship, they anchored the ship about 9 nautical miles away from the Colombo harbour, and they were just waiting. And that's when on the 20th May, around night time, 10:30, that started the fire. And then only the Colombo Port Authority was informed. So there was a failure upon the ship side for informing prior, knowing very well the issue is there, and they didn't do that. So we believe that it was really negligence on the part of the ship owners, the agents and everybody, in resulting in this major maritime disaster, which we consider as the world's worst as far as the chemicals and plastics are combined. So the fighting fire was also made difficult by the cyclonic conditions that were prevailing around the time in the May 23rd, 24th, 5th period, a very rough seas and so on. So that was made quite difficult as well. So that's in essence how the ship went. The new ship, a brand new ship, because of an error, it escalated into a huge disaster, which is very difficult to fight at the latter stages. But ultimately happened was 100% of the ship got destroyed, and our environment received all the results of that fire, the explosions and the discharges.
We are standing right at the Sarakua beach, which is the closest direct distance from the Express Pearl accident which happened in 2021, 21st of May. So this ship contained a lot of different types of chemicals. Not only these kind of plastic nurdles, but also different types of chemicals. The plastic nurdles that we are discussing here are the main, most, the type of pellets or nurdles, polymer type, that is being used to produce various different types of plastics that we are using in our day-to-day life. So this ship had more than 1,750 metric tons of these type of plastic nurdles. And altogether, the amount of polymers, plastics on board in this ship was about 12,000 metric tons. Not only the plastic nurdles, polymers, but also there were various different types of other chemicals. More than 300 metric tons of urea, sodium hydroxide, nitric acid. At the same time, there were more than 500 metric tons of sulfur, and then 90 metric tons of molybdenum oxide. And there were various other different types of chemicals, electronic waste, cloth materials and many more. So this ship as a whole is considered as a chemical cocktail of contaminants was onboarded on this ship. And all these chemicals were disposed or discharged into our sea. And we don't find any records of lithium-ion batteries full of container in the list of the goods given to the outside. But there have been this kind of a container which was given in the list of the various other sources.
there were chemicals used to douse the fire. So these chemicals also may have some impacts on aquatic organisms. Even on fish, there can be some kind of toxicity. But at that time, we can't avoid it because we had to douse the fire as soon as possible. And at that time, not only the Sri Lankan Navy and Air Force, but also the Indian Coast Guard and Indian Navy, I think, got involved. So they released some fire dousing chemicals. However, these chemicals may have affected different organisms in different ways. These explosions can damage the fish in different ways. It can damage the swim bladder or the air bladder, which is helping them for buoyancy. And at the same time, it can affect their inner ear. Actually, even fish survive, it can affect their sound reception. And also, the air sac, when it burst out, it did not happen only on adult fish. In all the fish, from young to adults, every fish may have got affected. So what will happen is, it will be a massacre. Now large numbers of fish around the ship may have died due to these explosions, and all these dead fish will sink to the bottom. So all these things had some effect on fish, although they were not visible to the naked eye. Mostly, the temperature increase due to the fire may have caused lot of damage to young fish, especially the small fish. We call them fish fry, or because they are planktonic. They are floating inside water, microscopic animals floating inside water, we call them plankton. That was a time where the fish are coming for breeding to coastal waters. So they come to lay eggs because in the coastal waters there are seagrass beds, there are reefs. So fish from distant areas, even from the deep sea, are coming towards the coastal areas for breeding. So at that time, we are not sure how many fish were breeding and what were the species which were breeding at that time. And also there may have been millions of eggs and larvae which are fragile and they cannot tolerate high temperatures. So they may have died even without our notice. So that effect will not be felt immediately. So we will see the loss after 6 years. 5 or 6 years. So that is why we say there is a hidden loss of biodiversity which we have not noticed.
මගේ නම ජෝසප්. ජීවර රැකියාව කරන්න මේගොල්ලෝ. ජීවර රස්සාව කරන්න පටන් අරන් දැන් අවුරුදු සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අවුරුදු 30ක් 35ක් විතර තියෙනවා. දැන් එන්න මූදේ මාළු සෑහෙන අඩු වෙලා යනවා දැන් එන්න. මේ නැවක් කවිලා මේ එක්ස්ප්‍රස් නැවක් කවිලා මෙහා වෙලා ජීවරයන්ට සෑහෙන පාඩු වුණා රස්සා කරන්න බෑ. අනිත් එක මේ එක්ස්ප්‍රස් නැව පෙරලතු වෙලාවේ ගිනිගත්ත වෙලාවේ රස්සා කරන්න ගියාම දැල්වල ඔක්කොම අවිලා පටලවන්න නිකන් පුළුම් වගේ ඔක්කොම දාන දැල්වල ඔක්කොම පුළුම්. ඒක රස්සා කරන්න බෑ ඒක. දෙකෙන්ම විනාශ වුණා. දැන් රස්සා කරන්න විදිහට මිනිස්සු ඔක්කොම අපේ රස්සාකාරයෝ ඔක්කොමලා දැන් පිට රස්සාවට යනවා පිටරට ඔක්කොමලා යනවා. මේ රස්සා කරන්න දැන් මිනිස්සු නැහැ. දැන් රස්සා එන්න රස්සාව අඩු වෙලම තමයි යන්නේ. මාළුත් අඩු. අපිට මොනවා වෙයි කියලා අපිට කියන්න බෑ.
ඒ වගේම මාළු අස්වැන්න. කොටින් මේ තත්ත්වයේ මාළු අස්වන්නක්ම නෑ. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ මාළු බෝවීම සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම අඩාල වෙලා තියෙන. මේ පැත්තට දැන් රස්සාවට යන්නෙම නැහැ අපි.
සෑම පරිදිම සදාමානස වහන්සේ ප්‍රශංසාවගෙන සියලු ශුද්ධවන්තයන්ද ශුද්ධ වහන්සේ මගින්ද වහන්සේ සමරද වහන්සේ විශ්වාස කරන අභිලාෂ ප්‍රකාශ කරමු.
out of 7 species of sea turtles in the world, 5 species come to nest in Sri Lankan beaches, and also they are foraging around Sri Lankan waters. So we know that there is a turtle, sea turtles are nesting throughout the year in Sri Lanka, but they have peak nesting season from March to June. This is a remarkable peak nesting season. So this accident was happened in end of May during this peak nesting season. And also from our studies, we observed that turtles are migrating from Sri Lanka towards India through Colombo. Through this along this accident was happened. So we can confirm that this accident was happened during the peak nesting season, and also in mid of their migratory route towards India. About 400 sea turtle carcasses found standing on the beach from May to September in 2021 during this expressible accident. This is very high number of sea turtle carcasses found during this season comparing to previous years data we have. There should be at least 2,000 sea turtles dead during this accident happened in May to September 30th.
In addition, the toxic smoke emitted from the burning ship contributed to serious air pollution.
Because under the National Environment Act, we know that air pollution is a punishable offence. As a result of this incident, we know what massive air pollution was caused, and we also saw the fumes emanating from this damaged or burning ship, which polluted the air, which affected our country as well as the neighboring country.
After the shipwreck, after the disaster, we saw there was about 3 kilometer length of a oil layer. So this oil layer, we could not exactly say what kind of oil, whether it is heavy fuel oil or whether it is petroleum oil or some other kind of wax or something like that. So we have some samples of this oil, solidified oil. So these are now, we call it as tar balls. So these tar balls are prominently can be seen in the seabed. So these tar balls can release various different types of petroleum chemicals into the water, and also these can be creating an effect for the fish as well, fish and other marine animals.
The fuel which leaked from the ship dealt another death blow to the living organisms in the vicinity.
After the fire accident, there was a whole lot of plastic pellets throughout this beach, from Negombo to Dehiwala, and the whole western coastline of Sri Lanka was filled with nurdles, small plastic pellets. We call them as microplastics as well. At that time, you would have seen big chunks of polymers. So this is an example of these kind of chunks. There were like huge chunks of polymers, and you can clearly see these chunks of polymers had the nurdles in this, attached to these chunks of polymers. So this was what happened right after the incident of the disaster. Actually, we had carried out a study in this beach. We had a cross cut of this beach up to 2 meters. And then during that, the depth of the cross cut, we found plastic nurdles up to 1.2 meters in depth. So not only on the surface, you find these nurdles in the depth of the beach as well. Because this beach is always, in a time of the year, this beach is being constructing, and then in the monsoon period, this beach is eroding. So this deposition and eroding makes nurdles to go in deeper and deeper layers.
Marine Pollution Prevention Authority initiated beach cleanup following the procedure laid down in National Oil Spill Contingency Plan. We took several agencies' support to carry out beach cleanup. More than 1,000 people work per day to carry out these beach cleanup activities. During this beach cleanup operation, we have collected large amount of plastic debris and other type of debris. We have stored these debris at warehouse to dispose finally in an environmental friendly manner.
Cleaning the beaches around the island littered with debris and plastic pellets washed ashore from the ship was indeed a Herculean task. Fishermen lost their livelihoods. Their fishing gear was also destroyed. Those whose livelihoods depended on the fruits of these fishermen's labor, too, lost their means of earning a living.
Due to the ship fire and the large number of pieces that have been spreading across the ocean, initially there was a fishing ban, so the fishermen were not allowed to go into the ocean. So therefore there was a loss of fishery income due to the ship accident. So many people have complained that their nets have been damaged, their boats have been damaged even after the fishing ban has lifted. So even now we will be getting large pieces of ship related debris into the coastal belt. So therefore entire coastal belt and the fishing industry has been affected due to this ship accident.
අපේ දීවර රැකියාවට ඒ නැව අනුතරටපත් වුණාන් පස්සේ අපිට මාස ගානකට රස්සාවට යන්න ඒ පැත්තට යන්න දුන්නේ නැහැ. වලාලේ දවසකට මුහුද සාමාන්‍ය තත්ත්වයට තිබුණා තායේ කැලම්බිල්ල කාවොත් කාරිය මුහුද ඕම්මම ඔය අපරාවේ ඔක්කොම දැල්වල පැටලෙනවා.
என்னோட பேர் வந்து நியூட்டன் லெஸ்லி தமிழ். நான் நீர்வழும்பு கரக்கட தெருவில் வசிக்கிறேன். எங்களுக்கு இந்த எக்ஸ்பிரஸ் கப்பல் பிரச்சனையால் எங்களுக்கு மித்த வேலைகள் மித்த பாதிப்பு நடந்தது. வேலைகளுக்கு நஷ்டஈடு வம்பிட இல்லை. அங்கே அந்த பக்கத்துக்கு தொழிலுக்கும் போத்தாராங்கள் இல்லை. தொழில் இல்லாமல் மிச்சம் பேர் சும்மா இருக்கிறாங்க. தொழிலுக்கு செல்லுறாங்களும் இல்லை. மற்றது இந்த எங்களுக்கு இந்த நஷ்டஈடு இன்னும் அம்பட இல்லை, இன்னும் லட்சக்கணக்கு மக்களுக்கு நஷ்டஈடு கொடுக்க இருக்குது.
එක්ස්ප්‍රස් පර්ල් නෞකාවේ සිදුවුණු පරිසර හානිය සඳහා වන්දි ඉල්ලලා මේන් සිදුවුණු පරිසර හානිය නිසා යම්කිසි ආකාරයකින් තමන්ගේ ජීවිකාව අහිමි වුණු දීවර ජනතාවට ඒ වගේ මේ පරිසර හානිය තුලින් අපේ රටට වුණු විපත්තිය වෙනුවෙන් විශාල වශයෙන් අපි වන්දි ඉල්ලලා තියෙනවා. දැන් වෙන රටවල ඒ වගේම තමයි මේ සම්බන්ධව කටයුතු කරන විදේශීය ආයතන කියනවා මේ සිදුවෙච්ච පරිසර හානිය වෙනුවෙන් ඩොලර් බිලියන ගාණක් ගෙවන්නට ඕන හරිනම් අපේ රටට. ඒ වගේම මේ නැව් සමාගමට විරුද්ධව අපේ රටේ පාර්ශව කීපයක් නඩු දාලා තියෙන්නේ වන්දි ඉල්ලලා. එතකොට ඒ නඩුවේ එක පාර්ශවකරුවෙක් තමයි කතෝලික සභාව. ඒ කියන්නේ අපගේ අතිඋතුම් මැල්කම් කාදිර රංජිත් හිමිපාණනුත් මේ නඩුවේ එක පාර්ශවකරුවෙක්.
Many laws were violated by this monumental environmental disaster.
Actually, this happened in our territorial waters. That is 9.5 nautical miles away from our shore. So, in the territorial waters, the law applicable is the law of the country, and number of laws are applicable in order to resolve the issues of this disaster. The main law which is applicable is the Marine Pollution Prevention Act. Coastal Resource Management Act has also been violated because our coastal area was totally covered with waste and pollutants and the chemicals, and especially with the hazardous waste. In addition to that, the Merchant Shipping Act is the other act which is applicable in this scenario.
මේකම කලපුව ගත්තම තාමත්ම අනාදිමත් කාලයක සිට දිවර ජනතාව යැපෙමින් ජීවත් වෙමින් ඉන්න හාමියාවට ජීවත් වෙන කලපුවක්, විශේෂ කලපුවක්. මේ කලපුවට මීට ඉස්සෙල්ලා අපේ මුතුමිත්තු කියන්නේ කලපුව අපේ අම්මාය කියලා. ඊට හේතුවක් තියෙනවා. මන්ද මේ කලපුවෙන් අපේ මුතුමිත්තු හම්බ කරලා මේ මාළු අරන් ගිහලා මේ විකුණලා ඒ මුදල් වලින් ආහාර අපේ දෙමව්පියන්ට දීලා ඒ අපේ මව්වරුන්ට දීපු ආහාර වලින් කිරි බීපු අය තමයි අපි. ඒතර මේ අපේ සිරුර මේ කලපුවට සම්බන්ධයි. ඒකට හේතුවක් තියෙනවා. මොකද්ද? පාරම්පරික දීවර ජනතාව පාරම්පරික රැකියාවල් ගණනාවක් මේ නියම කලපුව තුළ කරනවා. ඒකට හේතුව කටුගල් රැකියාව, මසොතු රැකියාව, ඒ වගේ රැකියාවන් පරිසරයට සම්බන්ධ රැකියාවලට කරගෙන යනවා.
They will eventually enter the biological systems of humans and in other creatures and may cause other health issues.
These nurdles are now seen in different sizes. First, the nurdle at the time of the disaster was around 4 millimeters, 4.5 millimeters like. But now if you go through this beach and find the nurdles, those nurdles are smaller than what we found originally. So that means the nurdles are degrading slowly and dissolving into the sea. So how it is being dissolved is these nurdles are being degraded to nanoplastics. So nanoplastics means these nanoplastics are being taken by the fish, by the coral reefs. These can be deposited in coral reefs, these can be deposited in seagrass beds, so that can have a long-term impact. And you all know the seawater is being taken to produce salt in this country. So if the seawater is contaminated with nanoplastics, very small microplastics, and our salt will also be contaminated with those polymers. So this will be directly going into our food web.
So we estimated this damage from the microplastic will stay there for nearly 100 years, and that damage came to about 1.2 billion US dollars.
So we can get affected in much severe way because most of these toxic materials can accumulate in their muscles, bones, skin, liver, and When we feed on them, it will come back to us.
So to give a very briefly an idea about how we did it, we assembled about 11 teams on various specific areas from coastal sites to the air quality, water quality, sediment, etc. And these 11 teams were assembled with one team very specifically on the damage calculation, and they were fed with data that were coming from the other teams, and they looked at the final calculations.
මට විතර නෙමෙයි ගොඩක් දෙනෙකුට මේ හරිය දිගටම වගේ අයට ගොඩක් ගියා පස්තාවේ ආවා ඉදුමත් එක්ක ඉතින් මට නම් අර ගොඩක් තදින් බලපෑවා බේත් ගන්න සිද්ධ වුණා තාමත් බේත් කොච්චර අමතර වියදමක් ගියාද ඒ වෙනුවෙන් මම ප්‍රයිවට් අරන් ගන්න බැරිද බැලිසර හොස්පිටල් එකට ගියා
So according to our estimates there was about toxic chemicals about nearly 1 kilogram emitted, and we found that it can damage about or kill actually about 70 individuals. So this carcinogen impact we have estimated to be about 56 million. So this loss to the turtles has been estimated as US dollar 4.2 billion.
Three and a half years have passed. They still struggle to clear plastic from the area. They haven't abandoned their hopes of restoring their homes, which include the beach and the sea, and attempting to bring back the previous splendor.
The impacts of this accident is evidently long lasting. You can remove the shipwreck, you can remove the debris and all the visual evidence from the scene, but it doesn't mean that the environmental damage is undone. The substances released from this ship are already out there. They are causing tremendous harm to our coastlines, ecosystems, natural environment and human health. Also, the ship fire has caused large emissions of toxic air emissions like dioxins and furans. Due to the wind conditions prevailed at that time, almost all of these pollutants ended up on the land rather than being dispersed in the ocean. So they will deposit on vegetation and in soil and eventually enter human body through food chains. These substances can cause tremendous health issues like cancer, genetic issues, immune problems, organ damage, etc., etc. So that is the situation now. This process can continue for decades. The best thing we can do now is to learn all the lessons that we should learn from this accident and use that knowledge to avoid any similar accidents from happening in the future. Express Pearl disaster is a unique accident case. This should definitely impact the rules and regulations currently applicable to the international maritime trade. While international regulators are taking care of that aspect, Sri Lanka and the neighboring countries must have their own assessments to identify measures for safeguarding their coastlines and waters. This accident also highlights various weaknesses in disaster management practices used by developing countries. We have to identify different strategic resource requirements such as underwater survey facilities, maritime firefighting equipment, ROVs, coastal surveillance aircraft, etc., etc. Unless we learn from these types of disasters, we are doomed to repeat them. and we will be talking about similar or even more catastrophic accidents in the future.
This lady, Sindrati, with an infant in one hand and pushing a boat with the other, gazes upon the faraway waters and the breaking waves. She awaits a day when justice is served to one and all. Through it all, there's the absurd scenario of the perpetrators washing their hands off the crimes they have committed. There's also the miracle of the unrelenting struggle to depollute not just the ocean, but a system of international justice. It is a struggle against untrammeled and even unpardonable crass consumerism. Tomorrow will bring news. Will it be about justice? Will it be of a new dawn that is in concert with the most ancient, enduring religious tenets? Will it or won't it?